Hey everybody, welcome back to UniX TCG, and today we are going to be continuing with our regional / treasure cup prep, and today will be everything you need to know about playing Kinemon from OPO2. So with that being said, just going to get the usual out of the way. If you'd like to support the channel in any way, shape, or form, you can just go down, hit that subscribe button, like the video, hit that notification button, comment. That was out of order for my GIF, but you know what? It is what it is. These are all free ways to help support the channel. You can also go over and join the Discord, join in the fun, the community talking and whatnot. I'm gonna try to be a lot more active. I'm always saying that, but this channel is growing so fast that sometimes it's a little overwhelming to keep up with anything, but I'm gonna try my best. I'm gonna continue to try my best. So yeah, content train inbound. But today we're going to be talking about Kinemon. We're going to talk about what makes the deck do the deck's things. We're going to talk about some of its additional options, and then we're going to roll into some of its matchups, why it has its place in the format, and hopefully solidify you on why you should or should not run the deck. That is up to you to decide. So yeah, hopefully it gets a lot of engagement. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments, and let's dive into it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the leader card himself, and that is actually Kinemon. Now, a lot of people, I think, misconstrue this card very, very often. People will come over and be like, okay, this card is better or worse than Kid because, but I'm always hearing these wrong reasons. People say that Kinemon only helps you in the early game, and that is actually not true. So the whole thing about Kinemon is his ability says when you have one or less characters on board, you can reduce the next land of Wano character that costs 3 or more by 1 cost in your hand. So what this means is you're going to have a couple bread and butter combos, like your 3-drop Okiku will cost 2 if you have 1 or less on board. Your 4-drop Yamato will cost 3 if you have 1 or less on board. The important parts to know about this, 1, this is an activate main that reads the state of your board when it is activated. So you can actually have 1 character on board activate Kinemon's ability to get the reduction, and as long as you do not play a land of Wano with 3 or more, you will not trigger the reduction effect until you do so. So I could have I could have anybody on board. I can activate his effect, play a Bonnie, play a Momo, play a killer blocker, and then go, okay, now I'll tap 2 for an Akiku. So this is something you have to understand. There's a little bit of flexibility with his effect. The other part that I want to address, not putting like firing shots at anybody, is that this is not just an early game effect. Sure, it works best when your board is empty, which is going to be early game. However, if you ever start to lose momentum, his effect is a powerful comeback ability. You're playing Odins for 7, Okiku's for 2, Yamato 4-drop for 3, Yamato 5-drop for 4. This is going to allow you to get back into the game at an increased rate just with that 1 extra Dawn being open. The other thing though is that on top of being able to hopefully have a comeback from behind momentum play, this card is the definition of momentum. Okiku on 2 is an entirely different ball game from Okiku on 3, and so on. So in the beginning, this card lets you super shoot your way into momentum, and if you can keep it, that's the name of the game. Momentum is so important in One Piece with summoning sickness and things like that, and then you have the ability to try to come back from behind later with reduced costs. So yes, this card is momentum incarnate, and I think that a lot of people sleep on it when they say it's only an early game effect. So moving past that, we got to talk about why Kinemon. Kinemon is a control deck. No matter what people say, oh, it's so aggressive. Duh. Half the cards in this deck are tapping things down, like your impactful cards. Your Kikus and your Yamatos are the main go-getters of this deck, and they tap things down so that you can then swing on them with said Yamatos, said Okiku, said leader, and make sure that your opponent is just put in a point where they can't keep things on board. They put things on board, and if they do not immediately affect the board via a come into play effect or a rush ability, they are liable to get swung on the very next turn and killed before they can actually really do something to the board. So, now that we've got that settled, let's talk about the cards that make up the deck. First, we're going to talk about the advantage cards, right? Advantage cards. Momo. This is going to seem very similar to Kid in the fact that you have Momo and Bonnie, but Momo in this deck is going to be the more reliable searcher since you now run more Land of Wano cards. This is your dude. He is going to search out almost every utility and power play in your deck, and it's not even close. So, that's Momo. Then we go over to Bonnie. She is pretty much the same, except you run less Supernovas in this deck, generally, and so she's going to be searching out mostly your blockers. Your Beges, your Killers, your Laws if you play them. She can search out X-Drake. You probably should be playing that. He's great destruction in this format. 4 cost is pretty great for that. And your Punk Gibsons. So Bonnie went from searching your power cards to searching almost virtually all of your defense. Oh yeah, and your Kid. Yeah, your Kid cards if you play them. Next, you got Raizo. Now Raizo is at a very, 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 very important part in this deck because you are going to, like I said, be leaning more on the Wano package, and because of Odin's effect, sometimes you can cheat this in if Odin dies, but this card gets so much work done. He is also a lightning rod. Raizo is one of those cards where if he is not thoroughly addressed as soon as possible, he will steal the game because he will just generate so many cards. You guys remember in the days of OPO1, these 2 cards, any combination of these is just multiple pluses per turn. You pay 1 to search up your top, you swing, you get another card. That's a +2 to hand if they both survive till the next turn, and you can keep +2ing. It becomes a massive landslide. So yeah. Now moving to defensive cards. This deck, like I said, much like Kid, has a lot of them. You're running Beige as the 1-drop blocker with no counter. A new addition is Toki. Now Toki is very, very cool because she is a 1K counter, 1 cost blocker, but she only gains the blocker ability when there is an Odin on board. Luckily, we have multiple targets of Odin, seeing as that we have, I can just search this out right now. In this deck, we have multiple copies of Odin in the way that we have this one, the actual Yamato that has come into the deck from this set that's very, very powerful. Like I said, like I may have mentioned before in other videos, all Yamatos are counted as Odin since Yamato identifies as Odin. So this is going to be an Odin for use. Your main boss card, the actual Kazuki Odin, is going to be counted as an Odin. And then if you do tech him, Yamato, the original SCR from set 1 is also counted as Odin. So altogether, you have 3 different cards, all greatly statted. I mean, when I say greatly statted, this one's pretty easy to remove. But these 2 are a little harder, and this one's incredibly sticky. So you definitely have ways to have Odins on board and actually keep them on board. So Toki is actually a pretty reliable blocker. If they have ways to get rid of 8-drop Odin, they probably were just going to push through your board a little bit anyway. So I'm not going to pretend like that's not a thing. But yeah, I think that's actually pretty cool. Now moving through the rest of the defense after Toki. Sorry, don't truck outside. You still have Killer Blocker. I feel like the energy economy in this game in this deck is a little different than it was in Kid, and so sometimes you'll be playing this card without the ability to put 1 Dawn under him. It's just the way the numbers end up mathing out sometimes. However, Killer is still a valuable 2-drop blocker. He's still a 1-drop or 1K counter in hand, and he will get you there. And your boards do get wide enough for you to get his effect when you have the extra Dawn. Then you have the Almighty Law. This is finding its way into more and more lists because he is still that dude. He's still able to bounce cards back to hand and play them. This is going to, in this deck, there aren't as many come into play effects. You'll be able to bounce an Izo to your hand after using his effect. You could bounce something to hand and play an Izo. You can bounce a more vulnerable card like a Momo or a Bonnie to hand to play out a Killer Blocker or something like that. You still have lots of cool effects like that. Sometimes he just resets your Okiku so Okiku can be swung on. But Law is still that card, and you can still use it to great efficiency in this deck. And searchable off of Bonnie. Every card in this deck is searchable, and that's just a great thing. So next we're going to move on to the control cards. The cards that make this deck the way it is, the cards that make it so hard to build a deck versus build a board versus it. And that's Izo. Izo is able to tap down something 4 or less, and he is a 2K counter, classic green staple. We've got Okiku, always was a green staple, but even stronger in this deck because, like I said, the Wano theme is stronger, and you're able to play this at 2 if you have 1 or less characters on board. Very, very strong. Best turn 1 play in the game, going second. Just in general, like in the entire game, it's just super strong. And of course, able to tap down something 5 or less with 1 Dawn, cost 5 or less with 1 Dawn under her when she swings. You got you've got a newcomer for this set. You got the Yamato. Great statted, 4 cost for 6K, able to tap something 6 or less when Yamato comes into play, and that is insane. So great stats, great effect, playable for 3 with Kinemon's effect, staple for this deck. No counter though, and we're going to get to that a little later. And then you've got, if you decide to play him, Blast from the Past, Nekamamushi, tapping things 3 or less. You're seeing this less and less in this deck, but if the format becomes chump blocker heavy, this can always come back into play. I definitely think that Nekamamushi is a very good card versus Zoro because you can tap a lot more things in the down with using less Dawn and then swinging on them, because keeping Zoro's field to a minimum is a paramount thing. They run less rushers than their previous iteration. Usually, you know, any number of copy of Luffy's, 3, sometimes 4 Zoros. Usually the deck runs less rushers, and so being able to tap them down when you need to is paramount. So that's pretty tight. And that pretty much is your tap suite, the cards that get your opponent's board into a position where you can start hammering them. Now, we're going to talk about destruction. There's really only 1 card you use in this deck for destruction, and that's actually going to be X-Drake, the dude. X-Drake last format was, for the most part, only really relevant versus blue. Everything else could be killer. But in this format, there's a lot more 4-cost cards that this can be used. You could force a Marco and then play this on a Marco to see if they really want to keep that Marco by going -2 in hand, or whether it just dies. This actually hits so many cards in purple that are at the magical 4-cost stat line. It's just good. This even hits cards like Yamato. This is a very, very, very good card in this format. There's just so many more valid targets that it hits, and it's searchable by Bonnie. Next, we're going to go over to the hit cards, okay? These are all cards that are just very, very, very strong. Your boss monsters in the deck, so to speak. And the first one we're going to start off with is 7-Drop Kid. This card is a monster. It fits very well into the numbers that you could be playing with this deck. It still is a very strong card. You're going to be able to block with it after swinging with it with the Dawn Under, swinging for 8K every turn and then untapping to block. They need to use at least 2 cards to get rid of it. In most decks, like red needs to minus it and then jet pistol it. Green, this guy's sticking because for the most part he has to be swung over. And so you really are able to protect this pretty well. Very, very good card, searchable off of Bonnie, staple in the deck. The next one, also staple in the deck, is the new addition of Kazuki Odin. This guy is going to swing twice if you want to tap 3 Dawn for him. And 3 Dawn is not a lot to get in an extra 8K swing. It's actually almost negligent. First off, his art is amazing too. I love the black Conqueror's Hockey lightning coming off of him. However, yeah, this guy is great. You can play him for 7 if you meet Kinemon's conditions. You are able to swing and make massive pressure. He's a board clearer. If your opponent swings with this guy on the board, they have to understand that anything that they swing with is probably going to die next turn unless it's just as big as Odin, because Odin is a big boy. So this is your main pressure. And then when he dies, he's able to play a 3-cost Land of Wano card from your deck. And so the main people that you're looking at are this brigade. If you want to set up a draw turn, you play Raizo next, Alpha of Odin when he dies. If you want to set up a tap turn and assault the board, you play Okiku. I don't really see too many reasons why you do this, but if you don't have any Okikus but you need to tap something, you set up the Izo. And also, you know what I said? I want to rewind. There's options for everything. Sometimes they might have a card on board that could swing, and it could mean the difference between life or death. In that case, you would play Izo. Izo would tap down that extra swing, and you could live that turn. So there's lots of different cards that you would actually want to bring out, all for different situations. But Odin not only is a card that he's one of the only cards that shuffles your deck too. So when he pulls it out, he'll shuffle your deck. It's great when you've been searching with Momos or Bonnies, because you'll be able to re-randomize and then start getting your searches off again. He's just such a crucial card, and I think one of the best design cards that this game has seen in a while. Just always feels good to have him. Now, next, when it comes to bombs, we're going to go to the bombs that are more or less tech, depending on what you're doing. You've got Yamato. Yamato is weird because Yamato is open to all sorts of destruction. Otama, you can Otama Seaquake this thing. You can Otama Vista this thing. You can just Jet Pistol this thing. Kaido or Purple has multiple ways to destroy this. There's a lot of ways. Even in green, you can tap it down and then attempt to swing big over it. There's just a lot of ways to actually get over this. But when you have the golden play, which is when you turn 2 Okiku, or turn 1 Okiku and then turn 2 Yamato, your turn 3, if they can't get rid of this, they are almost assuredly taking crit damage. Crit damage, banish damage. You are going to be able to put a Dawn under Okiku and swing and tap any blocker, and then swing with this, and then basically just annihilate. Put as much Dawn under this as you'd like, and then swing for 2. Damage that goes directly to the trash. So this is a very, 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 very strong card. If it lands, high risk, high reward. Because when you play this and they just remove it with one of those combinations, yeah, they might have gone -2, but you just wasted your entire turn. So high risk, high reward. In some cases, I think it's kind of worth it, because if I'm ever playing an early game and my opponent Otama Jet Pistols me, sorry, not Otama Jet Pistols, Otama Vistas me, they just went -2 in hand to get rid of one card. So sometimes against red, that trade is still nice because they don't have cards to spare all the time. So, it is what it is. Next, you're not seeing this as much in the deck anymore, but there still is 8-Drop Kid. 8-Drop Kid is a little harder to sustain because in this deck, you have less counter power than you do with Kid on average. Kid just had so many flex spots that you were able to saturate your deck with a bunch of counter power, and that's what you need. And a lot of times you'll find yourself with a lot of uncounterable in this deck, and we'll get to that a little later, and that can make defending Kid very hard. You'll just end up with like 2 counter power in a hand of 5, and somebody will just swing over Kid and it walks. So last but not least, I don't agree with this one, but it has to be put in here because some people do run it and they do find it nice. Denjiro. Denjiro is a 7K that can be played for 4. That's essentially what Denjiro is. Denjiro has an effect that untaps, but it only works if you have a Kazuki Odin as a leader. Just like the Kinemon SR from set 1 only works with a Odin leader. I feel like that needs to be an errata. I personally think that Kinemon's SR should work in the freaking Kinemon deck, but yeah, it is what it is. So with that being said, yeah, this is just a beater. Now we're going to move over to the defensive extras, and there are only 2, and then we'll wrap up the video with some of Kinemon's strengths and weaknesses. You've got Paradise Waterfall, cost 1, goes up 2k, and you get to untap a character. Very, very strong, can get you out of some weird situations. However, if somebody is smelling the Paradise Waterfall, they just need to swing with 3k, or with 2k over like they normally would if they want to pressure your hand. Because then you have to Paradise Waterfall and drop something from hand. And that's paying a Dawn, dropping at least 2 cards from hand. That's rough. This is, because it's a 2k stat line, it's very easy to play around. And that's why sometimes I do not like this card. Next, you have Punk Gibson. And Punk Gibson is going to do a lot of cool things. Has one of the best triggers off of life that you can find for green, where it just taps anything on your opponent's board, any character. And then Punk Gibson is going to be able to hit you with the +4 power to any stat, or any character or leader, and then tap something with 4 or less. Very, 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 very good against Zoro. Any kind of rush deck, even in green. Taps down blockers they were holding, taps down other swingers that were about to swing. Yes, you can play around this. You swing with the 4 or less, you leave your Luffy up, you leave your Whitebeard up. Yeah, this isn't going to be able to tap those. However, Punk Gibson is just a wonderful anti-aggro tool. And like I said, its trigger can be a game winner since it can tap any character. So, with that being said, let's move on to the finer points of Kinemon, and we'll finish up the video from there. So, we're at the question of why Kinemon. Like I said, between all of your draw cards, right? Kinemon is one of the most consistent decks in the game. You have 2 4-drop searchers as well as the Raizo. And that's actually just really, really, really strong. But now it's even more so consistent, because before with the green things, there's going to be a lot of parallels between Kid and Kinemon. Before with green, all of your great cards were essentially searched off of Bonnie, your blockers, your power cards, your bosses, your destruction, whereas Momo just searched your counters and some tapping cards. Well, now both ends search up a lot of things. The hierarchy of power is a little different now. Like Bonnie will search out blockers and 2Ks, whereas Momo will search out, now in the form of Toki, blockers. It'll also search out your power cards in Odin, in Yamato. It searches out your utility cards for your tappers. It searches out so many things. So this deck has everything at its beck and call as long as you can see your searchers. Raizo adding more consistency as adding a second draw. You have a double attacker in the form of Odin. There's an excellent amount of pressure, but the most important thing is you are tapping down everything that comes your way and attempting to swing on it before it can impact the board. And this is not just pressure on the board. This is potentially hand destruction. Because when somebody wants to protect something, they either have to let it go, like a Robin gets tapped and swung on, they have to let it go, or they have to fight it. And when you have multiple things lined up in order to attack, that fighting it could be haphazardous, you know. Luckily, green doesn't have any rush, so you don't have to worry about that. But there are some times where you can tap something and then swing into it with, like, you know, maybe 1 to 2K above it and watch your opponent drop 2 cards from hand, only for you to then tap 4 and swing into it, or tap 4 for a Drake. Sorry, 5 for a Drake, and then pop it. So there are some tricks you can do, but for the most part, this deck excels at keeping your opponent's board clean. So that's going to be one of the points that we are on here. But one of the weaknesses of Kinemon is its saturation of non-countable cards. So look, you got Beje. You run 3 to 4 of this card, no counter, 1 draw blocker. Okiku, non-negotiable 4 of, no counter. Yamato, non-negotiable 4 of, no counter. Up-and-coming tech, creeping its way into more slots in the deck, no counter. Powerful card, but it is what it is. Another card that should be at 2 to 3 in the deck, no counter. Odin, 3 to 4 in the deck, no counter. You were saturating your deck. Like, that's already like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, more than half of your deck just doesn't have counters, and that's not even like all of it. And so there are times where if you are unlucky, you just don't have the raw counterpower. Like, it seems weird because Kid definitely had a lot more of those cards, like almost just as many, I'd say. Like, Kid had around 20 or so, but I think this deck actually just has a higher saturation of non-counterable cards, so there's no the raw counter power that Kid does. And that can potentially land you in some awful positions. You do have to be careful. You can't just fight everything from hand. You have to be a lot more careful about your Open Dawn. Paradise Waterfall, as well as Punk Gibson, really do have their role to play in keeping you healthy and alive during these points. And this could sometimes have you getting slapped by decks that go wide, like Zoro. This deck has a fun, yet not fun matchup into Zoro. Depending on how you both draw, you could be tapping down most of their stuff and keeping them at bay for most of the game, or you could just not see your tapping down cards and not see enough counter and get bowled over. I think that Kinemon is the most consistent deck. It does the same thing each game, but I think its power level, just like I was saying in that previous video, if you haven't seen it, of consistency versus explosiveness, Kinemon has no such thing as explosiveness. Even when it goes off, it's all pretty tame, nothing outside of expectations, but it's very consistent. So you're going to see Kinemon take up a lot of top slots, but I think that quite often Kinemon can see the top end of other decks and get folded even when it's performing at a great level, because it is not very powerful. It is just very consistent in what it does, and there is power in that. So I think that Kinemon is one of the best decks in the format, but when you get high rolled, you get high rolled, and Kinemon is very prone to its high roll not being able to match the outputs of a red high roll. So that's pretty much where I have it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I think that when it comes across as matchups, I think that against Zoro, it's pretty even. Like, both decks can walk away with like easy dubs, mid-diff dubs, or like difficult dubs. It really depends on how each player drew. With Whitebeard, sometimes in Whitebeard's a late game, you start getting to, like Kinemon has to use its Dawn in a lot of ways that make it a little harder to combo into Whitebeard. And then once you get to Whitebeard's bigger bosses, there's not really much of a way to tap those bosses. So I think that Kinemon often can get really hurt by Whitebeard. Then you're looking at Ivankov. That should be an easy matchup, but if Ivankov goes big, then it's like the Dofi versus Kid all over again. You're sitting at a bunch of 7k to 9k swings, and it's very hard to counter those multiple turns consecutively. Against Black, that can be rough. Black can hand out, but this deck, you can actually tap Black's blockers very easily and then swing into their often fragile hands. But because you don't have Rush, Black is going to be able to handle your board very effectively as you're playing things. Also, versus Kaido, things like Odin make it easier. Odin makes it a lot easier to have insurance about getting your board wiped, and you can play very aggressive in this deck, like into Kaido. But, you know, when Kaido high rolls, Kaido does high roll. So, it's kind of weird. I think Kinemon has solid matchups across the board, but the most important thing is it's consistent enough to make those matchups always solid. So a lot of the player skill is going to be involved, but yeah, I think that Kinemon is just like the average in the middle solid deck. It's a very, very consistent deck. It's very, very good. It's the baseline of the format. If you want to play a deck, you need to make sure that you can see Kinemon with the hands, because you're likely going to see it in Swiss, and it's likely going to do the same exact thing every time you do see it in Swiss. So, with that being said, I'm going to sign out this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the Everything You Need to Know About Kinemon video, and we will get to the others in due time. Thanks. I'll see you later. Peace. But wait, there is indeed more. Quick messages from Mystic TCG. They are holding the Great Pirate Festival later this month in Missouri, where first place is going to win multiple boxes of Paramount War along with a super pre-release winner Luffy, as well as second place winning multiple boxes as well as a Manga Ace. And the prizes trickle down from there, but it is going to be an amazing event. So look at the details. They've been on the screen, they're still on the screen, and we will continue going off about that. And then also after this, we're just gonna have the quick normal advert for Mystic TCG, where you can find singles and, well, you can find actually pretty much anything, like sealed products, singles, pre-orders for this game and so many others. So just check that out. So let's talk about Mystic TCG, your one-stop shop for all your TCG needs. On the site, you can buy or pre-order plenty of sealed product for plenty of games. Just make sure though, if you're pre-ordering, to give it 3 to 4 months in advance to start looking, because sometimes the product is indeed hot, supply and demand, you know. And then if you want to buy singles, go on tcgplayer.com. There's going to be a link in the description where you can buy for the best value. And if you want to sell cards or collections, you can message them on their Facebook site so you can get the best bang for your buck on any type of way you want to buy or sell cards. And then while you're at it, you can use the code UNIXTCG at checkout to get even more of a discount. So hey, what are you waiting for? Check out Mystic TCG today.